Good evening and welcome to the Speak Easy podcast. The Speak Easy podcast is a comfort and safety zone for individuals like yourselves to come, listen, learn, and share. And I'm so excited because, in recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month, I have two dynamic ladies here today, Dr. Rhonda Wood and Dr. Josephine Harris. And these two, this dynamic duo is what I call them, they are going to impart some knowledge upon us and drop some nuggets on mental illness and mental health awareness. So, good evening, Dr. Wood, and good evening, Dr. Joe. How are you?
I am blessed.
Okay,
Doing
okay.
well, doing well. Thank you.
Great, great. So, Dr. Rhonda, I want you to let the audience know who you are, what your platform is, and why you became a mental health advocate.
Sure, absolutely. So, my name is Dr. Rhonda M. Wood. I am an international mental health empowerment speaker. I'm a best-selling author, and I am a mental health and wellness advocate. And so, I leverage my 30 years of corporate experience, and I speak to audiences and I enforce my mission to normalize and destigmatize mental health conversations. I also work with corporations and universities around the world to shatter mental health stigmas, to embrace compassion, awareness, knowledge, and acceptance when it comes to mental health. I am
Amazing.
the CEO of RMW Enterprises, and again, I use my voice to normalize and destigmatize mental health conversations, just to get us used to talking about mental health. Eradicating that stigma, not being ashamed or feeling fear of rejection, or not being accepted, and things of that nature.
Great. That is amazing. So, you said that you work with various universities across the country or around the world.
Yeah, so I love that we are using these virtual platforms. So I'm able to have sort of a broader reach, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be locally. So when you're sort of tied to platforms like this and it's virtual, you get to have a further reach. So I've taught been doing talks with people as far away as Nigeria, Africa.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so that's been awesome. I'm planning to do a talk in London virtually, and a few other places around the world as well.
Great. Dr. Joe, tell the listening audience about Dr. Joe.
Yes, ma'am. I am Dr. Josephine Harris. You can call me Dr. Joe. I am a psychotherapist as well as international psychologist. I'm also a certified mental health wellness coach and advocate. Well, I advocate for mental health. I mostly my audience is dealing with military spouse and veterans and their family. So I advocate for them for their well-being so that they can have a voice, so that they can overcome the mental health challenges that they have and been going through. So I do that, but my 9 to 5 is being a psychotherapist and an international psychologist, where I have international clients in Korea, Japan, really globally. So I'm very adamant of advocating for mental health and our wellness and our well-being.
Oh, great. So, I can say, like the young people used to say back in the day, I've got two international ladies here with me today. So, thank you so much for coming to the Speakeasy and your willingness to come and share. So, we've been talking about Mental Health Month and the different things going on in the communities. So, what have each of you noticed within the communities the greatest needs are related to mental health?
Wow, that's a great question. I think in terms of the community, one thing that I noticed, well, first of all, let me say this: mental health does not discriminate.
No, it does not.
Symptoms show up, it doesn't, it does not discriminate based on, obviously gender or age, socioeconomic background that affects people from the classroom to the boardroom, right? But one of the things I noticed specifically is that, and I'm sure both of you know this statistic is that, about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people, are affected by a mental health condition or symptom or diagnoses. One of the things that I've noticed, especially with everything that's been going on, is that, the younger generation are starting, I think that sort of age group, the sort of, they call them transitional age, TAs, ages like 18 to 25, their rates, their mental health symptom rate seems to be sort of growing the fastest. And I think the things that are going on in the world are affecting them the most. One of the things that I think that they're affected by, if I can just pick one issue, is sort of this issue of performance or achievement. Maybe I should say it that way, achievement. So feeling like, and I realize a lot of young folks are under a lot of pressures, right? They're under pressures with school. They're under pressure with, if they have jobs, with work. And sometimes they're under pressure from their peers, or they might be under pressure from, whom they live with, whether it's their parents or, loved ones, things of that nature. But I think there is this pressure to do great, do a good job. And I think that's a big issue. I think one of the ways in which we can support them, is sort of helping them to know the difference between excellence and perfection, and that it's okay to strive for excellence. But, I think a lot of symptoms show up when we're trying to make perfection sort of the standard. And so in addition to that, I think as we try and support them, we need to let them know that, one, our support and encouragement and love is unconditional. We're going to love them regardless, right? It's not tied to how good they do or how well they perform or how high they achieve, that we're going to love them regardless, that it's okay to have bad days. Sometimes things are going to not go right. Sometimes difficulties and challenges are going to appear, and to know how, the best ways to cope and deal when those things do happen. So I think that's a big issue that's affecting a lot of people today.
So, Dr. Joe, in response to what Dr. Rhonda just said, what guidance would you provide for a parent who is dealing with maybe an adolescent or a young adult that's going through this right now?
I'm gonna be transparent with you, because as I'm a parent, I'm a grandmother, and now in our days is starting to affect younger generations, like Dr. Rhonda said, is even with the 18, but it's also go younger than that, because with me as a mom, and my son was a teenager, and he's the youngest, he's 19 now, but he dealt with a lot of depression. And so for me, understanding his depression, the most important thing that I can tell parents, grandparents, either caregivers, teachers, is to listen.
Yes.
Listen, and don't be judgmental. Listen to what they have to say, because they also is crying out for just a listening ear. It's not that, okay, we put the stigma on it, okay, they just seeking attention. I don't think they're seeking attention. I think they attention needers. And when I say that need that attention, so that you can pay attention to their behavior, so that you can see what's causing them the depression, so that you can get the help that they need. So it's not attention seekers, it's attention needers.
Yes.
Wow.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, I know with this generation, a lot of them, especially the young ladies, they have a lot of issues with appearance and body image, and there's so much in the media, and they see the Kim Kardashians and they want to look like Kim Kardashian, not realizing that Kim has issues as well, because if she didn't, she wouldn't keep going to have modifications and things done as well. And so they see things with all the reality television shows, and they think that that's the way life is supposed to be. And so, Dr. Rhonda, you mentioned the striving for perfection. That happens a lot with body image in young girls, and sometimes in young men too, but I think it affects our young girls more than it does our young men. So what advice or guidance would you provide for those individuals?
Wow. Yeah. So, man, I actually struggled with body image issues growing up. I mean, you name it. I thought I was too dark. I thought I was too skinny. I thought I was too short, big forehead, big eyes, big lips, big hips. Well, not really big hips, but you know.
It's okay to dream.
I
It's
felt
okay
like
to
I
dream.
was more shaped like a boy, you know. I didn't have any curves. I mean, God, you know, I actually had those issues. And as a result, I, you know, struggled with self-esteem. I struggled with confidence. I became really, really shy and withdrawn, even though I felt like I had this bubbly personality, but I was just too intimidated, you know, to be lively because I had all these insecurities about my body. And you know, I think today a lot of young people struggle with that because, of course, they're looking at social media and of course they're looking at these celebrities, not knowing one, that a lot of times these ads, the print ads, are doctored, they're photoshopped, right? So we're trying to achieve a level of beauty that's false and fake. Whether it's print or even when it's live and in person, they're paying money to, like you talked about, Constance, for it to be for you know, to have their original body altered. One of the most powerful things that I did, two things. One is I went to therapy and learned how to love me. The other thing that was such a powerful breakthrough for me was to release myself from the bondage of what other people thought of me.
Okay.
Yes.
Once I grasped that concept, it was so freeing. I felt like a billion years had been lifted off my shoulders because the only opinion that mattered was me. So at one point, I used to feel so insecure. And then all of, you know, after going through therapy and dealing with some issues from my childhood, which, you know, a lot of this stemmed from not getting the validation that I craved when I was a little girl. And so when you don't get it growing up, then you don't have it as an adult. So that was where my root issues came from. But now I'm to the point where you know what, honey, let me tell you, I look in that mirror and I love that person looking back at me. I love all the parts of her. And again, she's not perfect. You know what? I love her trials. I love her ups and her downs. I loved her past and her present. I love all the parts of her because that's the person who, I mean, those things have made me the person that I am today. So the advice that I would give them is the two things that I learned. Number one, you know, release yourself from that bondage of what other people think. Hey, put that aside. You know, if you need to speak with a mental health professional, you know, to kind of heal those broken parts of you, then do that and realize that, you know, you are who you say you are. Your validation comes from you, and you can be unapologetic about the person that you're trying to be, regardless of what other people think.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can identify with that because, you know, you all know my story. I struggled with childhood obesity. And so my thing was, you're too fat for this. You can't be a cheerleader because you're too fat. You can't be a majorette because you're too fat.
Wow.
And, you know, again, it's that invalid validation, what I like to call it, from other people saying this and that. And one day I thought about it. Someone had said something really ugly to me one day. And I looked at that person and I'm like, you know what? They have a lot of nerve because they're not me. They've got this going on and they're not perfect either. So how dare they judge me on how I look? So that's when I learned to embrace me.
Yes.
For who I am. And like you said, that's what made me who I am.
Yes.
And I learned to embrace that. And, you know, my dad told me one day, he said, listen, you take the cards that you dealt with and you rock them and you play them and you win the game.
Yes, indeed. I love it.
That's what I learned to do. So, Dr. Joe, Give me some insight on this topic.
Wow.
You know what Dr. Rhonda said, and you said constantly. Let me tell you, I had to, because I have freckles, and I didn't like my freckles when I was coming up, and they used to call me spotted girl or freckle this and freckle that, even though I was the smallest person with the hips and the butt and the big breasts and all that. I had freckles. So I had to really embrace my freckles. I love my freckles now.
I love it. I love how Black people can have freckles. Can I just say that?
Exactly. And I used to get that a lot. You Black, why you got freckles? But yes, I had to embrace my freckles and love myself. So I had to really think about loving myself first and then embracing myself. So right now, I don't care what people say. I don't care how they feel about me, but I know who I am and whose I am. So I love myself, and I embrace my freckles. So
yes,
amen. So if Belle Biv DeVoe were to see you today, they would say, "Never trust a girl with a big butt." All right.
You know, Constance, that's so funny you say that, because when you listen to the thing that each of us struggle with, like you talked about obesity, but I talked about being too skinny. You know, I talked about not having a body, and Dr. Joe talked about having a body. Like, my insecurities were the things that you guys had, and yet you struggled with those things.
Exactly. And you know what? I tell people all the time, God made us diverse for a reason. Everybody don't like the same thing.
That's right.
Okay. So maybe one guy can't appreciate your hips, but the other one will embrace them and love them. Yes. And then another guy, he could care less one way or the other. It's the real you, that authentic you, that is attracted to him. So wow, this is good. I like this. And so, Dr. Joe, as a military spouse, I'm sure in your day-to-day, you encounter all types of issues, from trauma, separation anxiety. You know, here's a mother with kids and the dad is away, or vice versa. Sometimes the kids are left with someone else because both parents have been deployed.
Wow.
You know, and so what type of stress or triggers are you noticing in children of parents in the military?
Wow, because let me tell you, that's a good question. And our kids grew up together. We have total of 8 kids. So
that's awesome.
We've been in the family forever. And the youngest one, the youngest one had a very hard time adjusting. He's 19 years old, and you won't believe it, he's in the Air Force.
Wow.
So he was one of the ones that was difficult to adjusting to each lifestyle, because he was the youngest, and each of the kids have adjusted pretty well, but he was the one that we moved from duty station to duty station, and he had to transfer school in the middle of the year, and he had to meet new friends. So now at that point that he's afraid to even get close to people, because he know that we getting ready to move again. So he won't have that closeness with people. And so that's why we are a knitted, real close family, because we have to show each other how to be socialized with other people, because we move so much. And that's that caused a lot of stress and a lot of tension, because he used to act out in school. He used to have poor grades. And then we had to realize that, okay, he needs that extra help, that extra support, because of what he's going through and all of the stress and depression that he went through.
Wow.
That's a big one.
Yeah. You know, I can just imagine you think about when people are deployed, they're going to be gone 18 to 24 months, and they've got kids at home. But sometimes it's both parents are gone. And so just think about that trauma to that child that has to go throughout every day. You know, grandparents can be just as good as they want to be, good as gold. But it's nothing like having your parent there with you to share things with and to see you at different milestones in your life. And so, you know, that crossed my mind, and I thought about your practice and the things that you do. And that's why I posed that question. So let's talk about community resources. How can one seek help and guidance? You know, if they suspect that either themselves or a loved one has a mental health issue?
Well, I think there's a few things. And I love that you say that, because I do think that it is a community responsibility, right? So
Mhm.
we kind of feel like, well, if it's not us who's struggling, then that responsibility is on somebody else. But I think we all need to take responsibility, whether it's ourselves, whether it's our loved ones, whether it's our coworkers, our neighbors, and checking in on people, especially those who appear strong. I think that's so important,
Yeah.
because as
Yeah.
we all know, mental health has different faces, right?
Yes.
Some people show up strong with a smile on their face and head held high and are functional, even when they're exhibiting mental health issues as serious as suicidal thoughts or plan of action. And then there are those who might, yeah, indeed, like, those are those people I just talked about are people whose symptoms may not show up externally. And then there are those people whose symptoms might be external. They might show the downheartedness or the isolation or the nervousness, or PTSD symptoms or something like that. But I think for a lot of people, especially because of stigma, they're not comfortable with that level of vulnerability. So I think some of the ways in which we can support someone who might be, having some issues, whether it's a friend or a family member or whomever, is to reach out to somebody whom you trust. I think, not everybody may be comfortable talking to a mental health professional, such as a therapist, such as a Dr. Joe, but they might feel comfortable talking to a Constance, so it doesn't necessarily have to, be that person, or you may not be ready for that step yet. So maybe it could be a pastor, maybe it could be a neighbor, a family member, a really good friend, or maybe even talking to your primary care doctor might be a good first step for someone. But I think for a person who might be exhibiting issues, who might have symptoms, I think, like Dr. Joe talked about earlier, man, sometimes people want to be heard. So I think being a good listener, asking what you can do to help, offering to lend a hand, supporting them if they are ready to take that step and seek treatment or be open about it. Learn as much as you can about the mental health condition or symptoms, and helping them find the resources. And resources can be anything from virtual therapy, a doctor's visit, maybe even calling, one of the mental health helplines or things of that nature. Some people's employers have like an employee assistance program, or something of that nature. So I think all of those are some good first steps to support people who might need some help with their, managing their mental health.
And I'm glad you mentioned the EAP, or Employee Assistance Program, because a lot of people have that resource available and
Yeah.
they're not aware. And it's not
Yeah.
just for them, the employee, it can be for a family member.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
I can remember back in the day, I had it available to me, but I thought it was just for me.
Mm-mm.
But I found out I was able to get sessions for my son.
I
And
love
Yes.
it.
so we need to increase and heighten that awareness around EAP programs, because, again, a lot of people are totally unaware. So thank you so much, Dr. Rhonda, for sharing that. Dr. Joe, what resources or assistance are you aware of that you can share?
Wow, let me tell you, it's a plethora of resources out there. Like I am a military spouse, so it's a plethora of resources. And most military families really don't want to deal with the therapist that's in the military. They want to go outside the military. So it's resources that will help military spouses outside, military families outside of the resources. Like for me, I'm one of the resources because I deal with a lot of military spouses, and I give them a plethora of resources as well. Like in my area, they have safe shelters. They have Nemo, which is I'm one of the board members on that in the state of Washington. So they have one of the things I really let my clients know is that you really have to reach out to the resources surrounding you, and which are the military one source. They have that. They have the AMFLAC, which is the AMFLAC is they help you, and they are certified therapists, and they don't keep records of what they're doing and who they see because of
Mhm.
the stigma that the military holds against their soldier members and their
Wow.
families. So there is resources out there that keep confidentiality, and they won't have to deal with the military, because in the military they tell the soldiers to suck it up and move on. They put a band-aid on it and move on, but the highest rate, suicide rate, is in the military.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow. That is totally amazing. Dr. Rhonda, as you know, I spoke on suicide prevention when we were in Paris back in April.
Right.
Because so much occurring around suicide at that time. And I'm like, my gosh, what is going on? And you're seeing an increase, especially in women.
Oh, yeah.
And so my thing is, us as professionals, we know how to recognize the signs and symptoms. But what about the lay person who has no healthcare experience? How do they recognize?
You said, what about the what person?
The lay person.
The lay person. Your everyday person who has no medical background. How do they recognize that? How can they? What tools can we provide? And so one thing I'd like to talk about is the tribe effect. Because a tribe is a system of support. And so if you have someone, a family member or a friend that you've been concerned about, you've seen a change in maybe their appearance, or they're not grooming as they normally would, or they're more withdrawn, they're not talking. It's important that you get to know that person's neighbors. So in case something happens, you know who to reach out to and say, hey, hadn't seen them in a week or so. Have you seen them? Are they okay? And I even say to people at work, when we do treatment teams for those with mental illness and, treating them, involve the janitors and the housekeeping staff, because they may talk to that janitor with ease about something and may say something that janitor can pick up on and let someone know about, versus the nurse they may not feel comfortable with. So I think it's very important that we do that. We do all we can. Dr. Joe, what recommendations would you have as far as training someone in the community, or just a lay person or a family member, on how to recognize triggers or signs and symptoms of suicide?
Wow. One of the things that constantly that I recognize, and I tell my clients if they have family members that's dealing with mental illness or mental health issues, is that the change in behaviors is they giving away their possessions, things they lose interest in. There was an extrovert and turned into an introvert. So is they telling you that, okay, I don't want to be here no more, I wish I was disappearing? Or is they went back to, if they haven't been drinking but started drinking, if they haven't been smoking but started smoking? So you have to watch out signs for that. If they feel like depressed, they feel down, they isolate themselves from their social world, and it was sociable. So pulling themselves back from family members, from friends, going out, seeing other things that they used to have fun with and then lose interest in.
Wow. Those are all really good.
Yes. Wow. There's just so much that we can say and do, because the three of us are passionate about this. And when that passion is there, it drives so much. It drives ideas and thought processes. And so that's why I chose to spend this month to do my soft launch of this podcast and dedicate it to mental health awareness, because the needs are so great. The stigmas are real associated around mental illness. But, we need to realize and recognize and let others know that mental illness is an illness, just like hypertension, diabetes, what have you. It is a real illness. A lot of people don't believe that it's real.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, I'm sorry, Dr. Joe, I was going to say, like you talked about, Constance, is I think people take a physical illness much more serious than a mental illness.
Yes.
And, if we had a cancer, the community would be like, oh my goodness, let's do bake sales, let's raise money, let's bring meals over, let's do all these things. But if you tell somebody, girl, I'm feeling depressed, all of a sudden we're not sure what to do. And I think the best thing we can do is to have this empathy and compassion right? And to eliminate the stigma. I think if we eliminate the stigma attached to mental health conditions, mental health symptoms, mental illness, whatever you want to call it, more and more people will begin to be open about how they're doing and how they're feeling. More and more people will get the support and the help that they need to start to get better or to be on the path to feeling better and learning how to manage their symptoms or get treatment for their symptoms. It will just start to open up a lot more doors, and we'll start to do better as a society. We'll start to look out for each other and embrace each other. But as long as that stigma is there, and as long as people continue to treat mental health like it's not like it's a disease or a sickness or an illness, we're going to be in trouble.
Exactly.
That exactly.
It's just like when someone loses a loved one, and especially in our community, everybody wants to go run into the house at one time and just big groups and hang out and sit and talk and eat and laugh. But then when the funeral is over and the burial has taken place, everybody withdraws and retreats. And that person is now alone.
That is.
And my thing is, I learned from when my mother died, I don't do that. I don't go run to people's houses. I call and see if they need food. But I wait till maybe 6-8 weeks later and go by and visit. Or 3 months later. Around the holidays when they really miss that person. Because that's when they really need the support the most.
And that is so true.
The most, and I have a friend, she recently lost her older sister. And I'm staying in contact with her because, this was somebody who was like a rock to her. And it was really a mother figure, because the mother passed away a few years ago. And this person took on that matriarchal role in the family. And she said something to me, my last text to her, that really touched me. She said, "We started out 8 strong.
Wow.
And now it's just the 4 of us." And that's a lot to think about.
That is
a lot. And so I think about myself. It was just as an only child, just me and my parents. And now they're both gone. And I'm like, oh my God. Here I am in this lonely space. Here I am. But we need to be aware of these things and reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. And if it's only for 5 and 10 minutes, and if that person knows that you are there and that you care, eventually they will start feeling more free to reach out to you for that support. Sometimes it just takes just being there. You don't have to say a word. Just your presence alone.
Yes.
Makes a world of difference.
Yes.
And so, Dr. Joe, I'm going to ask you for some final thoughts on our discussion tonight. And then, Dr. Rhonda, I'll get you next.
Sure.
You know what? One of the things I want everybody to think about is like, it's okay not to be okay, but you don't have to be stuck there. Yes. You can reach out for help when you need it. Reach out for help when it's unnecessary. It's okay to okay, I need a break. I need a mental break. I need to relax. It's okay to be self-care. Self-care is not selfishness. You need that mental health break.
Yes, we all do. As I always say, we are all one step away from cray-cray.
I love it.
Just one step. Yeah, just one step. Okay. So thank you so much, Dr. Joe. Dr. Rhonda, your final thoughts.
So my final thoughts, actually, I want to dispel a myth. I remember, so I took a leave of absence from my corporate job to focus not only on my own mental health, but the mental health of my daughter. Actually, it started with her. And then I realized, wow, we both need to be in therapy, right? But that brings me to one of my thoughts is that when you really want to focus on mental health, especially if you're supporting someone else, you got to prioritize you.
Yes.
Right? You can't help somebody else unless you make sure that you're okay. And we've heard about the cup and, not to serve from a, empty vessel and things of that nature. But I think that's so important. I think we give a lot of attention and a huge, a lot of attention and focus to people who are doing a lot, whether it's women, whether it's high achievers. You're like, oh my gosh, look at her. She's doing this, this, and this. Or she's achieved this, this, and this. Or she's juggling this, this, and this. And we give them a badge of honor. But if we see somebody like, wow, look at her taking time out for herself today, we don't congratulate that, but we need to. That needs to be normalized. Yeah. And if I can just address one other thing, the huge myth is that a lot of people feel like if I have mental health, or if someone I love has a mental health issue, then that is a reflection of their spirituality or their faith, right? I think some people fear getting help because the stigma of feeling like they're not close to God, they're not reading enough, they're not praying enough. But let me say this, they can both exist. You can be a person of faith and still struggle with mental health symptoms.
Yes.
I can go to church and be faithful, right? And tithe and give and, worship and serve and lead, and I can still have anxiety. I can still struggle with depression. I can still fear. I can be overwhelmed. I can be stressed out. It is not a reflection of my faith. It does not mean that I'm not close to God. So I just want to dispel that. And also getting help. I can go to therapy and go to church.
Yes.
I can do them on the same day, right? Yes. They can both exist at the same time. So I just want to dispel that myth. I don't want anybody to feel like they can't exist together. And a lot of times God sends the help through other people and resources. Yes. So sometimes that is the answered prayer. So I just feel like that was a huge myth that needed to be addressed. So I just wanted that to kind of be my final thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And oftentimes, especially in the Black church, they'll say, well, we don't do that because, we got Jesus, we got prayer, we got discipline.
Yes.
But you can have all three of those things, and if you bordering on cray, out the window it goes.
But you know what, Constance? You bring up a really good point. Because I feel like there are a lot of us who are struggling with certain levels of trauma that's generational because of things that we've been taught like that, because of the what goes on this. So we start to learn things like, keep it in, suppress it, deal with it, don't talk about it, don't cry, that makes you weak, don't cry, be a man, don't cry, be a big girl, don't emote. Yes. And we don't realize how much that is affecting our mental well-being. Those teachings, they sound good at the time. We thought that was the right thing to do. And then we grow up dysfunctional. But if we don't learn better, then we'll pass that dysfunction on.
Exactly.
And it'll just continue. And so we need to, again, break that cycle.
Yeah.
So
the same thing happens with marriage counseling. Only thing y'all need to do is get somebody to watch those kids. Y'all get together, put on some Luther Vandross and get a bottle of scotch and y'all work that thing out. Okay? And as Millie Jackson said, if you're not back in love by Monday, then you go your separate ways. Instead of going and see somebody. Okay, to help you work through it. You're going to sit there and a weekend and listen to Luther and drink. And God knows what else. Okay, and then Monday morning you wake up with a headache and you still got the same problem.
Except now you got a headache and your problems.
Thank you. And your marriage is still a mess.
Yes.
So go get some help. That's all I got to say. Go get some help. It's okay. They got people out there that do that for a living. They need business and they need an income, and you need help. Yes. So go get some help.
Wow.
So I want to thank you both, Dr. Rhonda Wood and Dr. Josephine Harris, for being my dynamic duo on mental health advocacy here at the Speak Easy podcast. Join the Speak Easy every Sunday, 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to do the Sunday evening wind down or the Sunday evening wind down, whichever works best for you. Whichever works best for you. So until next week, take care.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Constance.
so much.